9 days, 3 bank robberies, 1 crew. Here is how the FBI's Kansas City Violent Crimes Task Force put them away. The teller at UMB Bank on Main Street in Kansas City had been through training drills. She knew what a robbery note looked like. She had rehearsed the protocol. Nothing prepared her for the moment a man stepped to her window on a Tuesday morning, slid a folded piece of paper across the counter, and stared at her without blinking. She read it in under 3 seconds, hit the silent alarm, handed over the cash drawer, and then he was gone, out the door, onto the street, as if he had walked in to make a deposit. The alarm reached the Kansas City Police Department at 9:47 a.m. By the time the first patrol unit arrived, the suspect had a 4-minute head start. By the time the FBI's Kansas City field office logged its first case notation, the man was already across 2 zip codes. That robbery was not the beginning of this story. It was the moment the Bureau realized the story had already been going on longer than anyone knew. Within 7 days, the FBI's Violent Crimes Task Force would link 3 separate bank robberies across Kansas City to the same crew. Within 9 days, surveillance footage, dye-pack chemical analysis, and traffic camera reconstruction would give agents a face, a vehicle, and a route. What happened after that moved faster than almost anyone inside the field office had anticipated. And the way it ended said something about how the Bureau hunts serial robbery crews in the modern era, and why Kansas City had become one of the most active bank robbery corridors in the American Midwest. The Kansas City field office operates out of a building on Armour Road in North Kansas City, Missouri. The Violent Crimes Task Force, the VCTF, is a joint operation between Bureau special agents and detectives from the Kansas City Police Department. It was built specifically for this kind of case: fast-moving, multi-incident, multi-jurisdiction violent crime where the window between the first offense and the next is measured in hours, not weeks. The special agent in charge of the Kansas City Division had seen bank robbery surges before. The Bureau tracks every federally insured bank robbery in its jurisdiction through a system that flags geographic clusters and MO similarities almost automatically. What the VCTF watches for is what agents call a signature, a repeating set of behaviors that marks a robber or crew as distinct from isolated opportunists. The UMB Bank robbery on Main Street had a signature: the note, the timing, the direction of egress, the calmness. This was not a desperate, impulsive crime. This was someone who had done this before, or had prepared extensively as if they had. The branch manager at UMB Bank pulled together everything the FBI requested within 2 hours of the initial alarm. Surveillance video from 3 interior cameras, the demand note, bagged for fingerprint and handwriting analysis, witness statements from 4 tellers and 2 customers, description of the suspect: male, average height, dark jacket, baseball cap pulled low, no visible tattoos, no distinctive facial hair. The kind of description that could apply to several thousand people in any major American city on any given morning. The fingerprint team ran the demand note that same afternoon. No match in the automated fingerprint identification system. Whoever this person was, they had either never been arrested or had kept their prints clean. Handwriting analysis would take longer. In the meantime, agents had surveillance footage to work. The interior cameras captured the suspect from 3 angles. Quality was sufficient for technical analysts to extract still frames and begin image enhancement, but the hat brim cut off most of the face. What the cameras captured clearly was posture, gait, clothing, and the way the suspect moved. Deliberate, unhurried, someone who had mentally rehearsed every step before walking through the door. Then 41 hours after the Main Street robbery, Kansas City was hit again. At 10:22 a.m., 2 days after UMB Bank on Main Street, a U.S. Bank branch on Gregory Boulevard in the southern part of the city reported an armed robbery. The call came in at 10:24. By 10:31, the first KCPD patrol unit was on scene. The suspect, again, was already gone. The Gregory Boulevard robbery changed the calculus entirely. 1 robbery is an incident. 2 robberies, 41 hours apart, with matching tactical patterns. That is a string. And a string meant the VCTF was no longer working a past crime. They were working a crime that was going to happen again. The demand note from Gregory Boulevard had not yet cleared fingerprinting, But the surveillance footage told investigators what they needed in the first review. Same build, same deliberate movement, same style of note delivery. The hat was different, lighter colored, but the way the suspect stood at the counter, the angle of the body toward the teller, the timing of the hand movement when receiving the cash, all of it matched. Special agents began cross-referencing both robberies against the Bureau's bank robbery database, which catalogs incidents across all 50 states by method, geography, and physical description. What came back was a series of similar cases from the prior 18 months. Not all in Kansas City, not all definitively linked, but enough in the regional pattern to suggest this individual or crew had been active for a significant stretch before the Bureau had them in focus. I spent time going through the publicly available case documentation on this series, and one detail kept standing out. The average time from entry to exit at both Kansas City branches was under 90 seconds. That is not accidental. That is a trained operational window. Most bank robbery crews that get caught stay too long. They get greedy, they argue. Someone panics. 90 seconds is the discipline of someone who has studied the risk profile and committed to it. That discipline was about to be tested. On the third day after the Gregory Boulevard robbery, the VCTF pulled traffic camera footage from the corridor between US Bank and the nearest highway access point. It was a labor-intensive process. The Kansas City traffic camera network is managed by the city's Public Works Department, and pulling footage from specific nodes required coordination between the field office, KCPD's traffic division, and city administrators. That kind of interagency coordination, even in a well-oiled task force environment, takes time. Time the investigation could not easily afford. The VCTF coordinator assigned 2 agents exclusively to the traffic camera project. They worked backward from the timestamp of the Gregory Boulevard alarm, 10:22, and reviewed footage from every camera within a half-mile radius of the branch, moving outward in sequence. The goal was a vehicle, make, model, color, and ideally a partial plate. Without a vehicle description, the suspect could be anywhere in the metropolitan area. With one, the net could be tightened dramatically. What the agents found on the third day of the traffic camera review was a vehicle, a mid-size sedan, dark blue or dark gray. Inconsistent lighting made the color difficult to confirm. On footage from a camera at the intersection of Gregory Boulevard and Warnell Road, approximately 4 minutes after the robbery alarm. The vehicle moved at normal traffic speed, stopped at the light, and turned south. Nothing drew attention in real time. In context, it was a thread. The partial plate captured by the Warnell Road camera was 3 characters. In Missouri, 3 characters from a license plate can narrow a field of registered vehicles from millions to hundreds, sometimes fewer depending on the character positions. The VCTF ran the partial through the Missouri Department of Revenue's vehicle registration database. The results came back with 47 possible registered vehicles, matching the partial, the state, and the general description of a dark, mid-size sedan. 47 was workable. Agents began cross-referencing ownership records against criminal history, outstanding warrants, and geographic proximity to both robbery locations. On the morning of the third robbery, they were still working through the list. The Waldo neighborhood robbery happened at 11:08 a.m., 6 days after the UMB Bank incident on Main Street. Waldo is a residential and commercial district in the southern part of Kansas City, known for its local restaurants and small businesses. The branch targeted was a community bank with a single teller window visible from the street. This time, something was different. The teller at the Waldo branch followed protocol. She handed over the cash drawer, and inside that drawer, placed there as a matter of standard procedure she had no control over, was a die pack, a bank security device that activates upon exit from the branch's magnetic field, releasing a burst of red dye and tear gas chemical that stains currency and frequently the person carrying it. The suspect left with the cash and the die pack. The device activated approximately 20 feet past the front door on the sidewalk outside. Witnesses reported a red cloud of dye. The suspect did not stop. He continued moving toward a waiting vehicle, the same dark mid-size sedan from the Gregory Boulevard traffic camera footage, and got in. The vehicle departed south. For the VCTF, the die pack activation was significant in 2 ways. First, it confirmed a vehicle direction matching the earlier footage. Second, it meant that currency in the suspect's possession was now stained with a distinctive red chemical compound. Bait money, serial numbers on file, now also visually compromised. Any attempt to pass that currency at a business or financial institution would trigger an immediate flag. The chemical compound in modern die packs stains both currency and the handler. It does not wash out easily. It is detectable on skin, clothing, and interior vehicle surfaces for days after exposure. The Bureau's Forensic Chemistry Division maintains reference samples of die pack compounds used by major bank security vendors, allowing them to confirm, when a suspect is located, whether trace chemical residue matches a specific incident. Put yourself in the position of the lead VCTF agent at this moment. You have 3 confirmed robberies, a vehicle description and a partial plate, die pack evidence that can tie currency and a person to the Waldo branch robbery, surveillance stills undergoing image enhancement, and a suspect who has demonstrated both discipline and speed, someone who is not going to slow down simply because the investigation is tightening. The question is whether the investigation can tighten faster than the next robbery is planned. That same afternoon, the image enhancement team delivered a problem. The surveillance footage from UMB Bank on Main Street, the highest quality interior recording from the 3 branches, had been partially corrupted during the export process. Approximately 11 seconds of footage from the angle that captured the clearest view of the suspect's face was unrecoverable due to a compression artifact in the branch's DVR system. 11 seconds. Enough to have provided a face-forward image suitable for public release. Gone. The technical team pivoted immediately. They worked the remaining footage from all 3 branches simultaneously, using gait analysis software to build a composite movement profile. Gait analysis, the study of how a person walks, their stride length, the way they shift weight, had become an increasingly reliable forensic tool for the Bureau in serial crime cases. 2 individuals can wear the same clothes, use the same note template, and choose the same type of branch. Almost no one walks identically. The gait profile from the 3-branch composite gave agents something measurable. Height estimate between 5'10" and 6'1", right side dominant, slightly favored the left foot at turns. It would not stand alone as identification in a courtroom, but it could confirm or exclude a suspect within seconds of comparison. What strikes me about this phase of the investigation is something that rarely gets discussed in the public conversation about bank robbery cases. The assumption is always that the FBI's primary tool is technology, cameras, databases, digital forensics. Those tools matter. But what actually drives the identification timeline in a case like this is old-fashioned detective work. Agents physically visiting every business within the egress corridor, talking to owners and employees, asking who saw what and when. The technology confirms. The fieldwork finds. Agents canvassing the corridor south of the Waldo branch spoke to 16 business owners and employees in the 2 days following the 3rd robbery. One of those conversations at a convenience store approximately 3 blocks from the branch produced something the cameras had not. A witness who had seen the dark sedan parked in the store's lot for approximately 25 minutes before the Waldo robbery. The witness had not thought much of it at the time. Cars park in convenience store lots, but the witness remembered because of the driver. Someone who sat in the vehicle the entire time without coming inside, without using a phone, just watching the street. The witness provided a description of the driver that was more detailed than anything the branch surveillance footage had yielded. That description went immediately to the VCTF analyst team, who cross-referenced it against the 47 vehicle registrations still being worked from the Gregory Boulevard partial plate. The cross-reference narrowed the field from 47 to 11. By the end of that same workday, 3 of the 11 had been eliminated through alibi verification and physical description mismatch. 8 remained. Here is the take that will probably draw some disagreement. The Kansas City bank robbery surge that framed this case did not happen in a vacuum, and the Bureau knows it. Kansas City has consistently ranked among the top-tier metropolitan areas for bank robbery frequency in the Midwest. Not because of any single factor, but because of a specific combination. A dense network of small and mid-sized branches clustered in commercial corridors without adequate exterior security camera coverage. a public transit system that provides egress options not requiring a registered vehicle, and chronic underfunding of the local task force infrastructure that slows response time on multi-incident strings. The FBI's Violent Crimes Task Force in Kansas City is effective. It is also, by the Bureau's own internal assessments, understaffed for the volume of cases it carries. That is not a criticism of the agents. It is a structural problem that was contributing to this case before the first robbery ever happened. The system failed the tellers at UMB Bank on Main Street, at US Bank on Gregory Boulevard, and at the Waldo branch long before anyone walked through those doors. What do you think? Does the responsibility for preventing a serial bank robbery string fall on the FBI, on the banks themselves, or on a system that consistently underfunds the task forces doing the work on the ground? Drop your answer in the comments. This is a conversation worth having. Agents working the Violent Crimes Task Force operated on a standing protocol for serial bank robbery cases that designated any string of 3 or more incidents within a 30-day window as a priority series investigation, a classification that unlocked additional analytical resources, authorized expanded surveillance operations, and required daily briefings to the special agent in charge. The priority series classification for the Kansas City string was formally entered into the case management system the day after the Waldo robbery. The case was assigned a federal file number. Resources that had been working the string on a secondary basis were reallocated to primary. The 8 remaining vehicle registrations were assigned to individual agents for direct field follow-up rather than database cross-reference. 2 of those follow-ups produced immediate results. The first was a dead end. The registered owner of a dark gray sedan matching the partial plate lived 40 miles from any of the 3 robbery locations and had documented employment records placing him at a warehouse job in Independence, Missouri at the time of all 3 incidents, eliminated. The second field follow-up led agents to an address in the Ruskin neighborhood in the southern part of Kansas City, approximately 3 miles from the Waldo branch. The registered vehicle was a dark blue Chevrolet Malibu, 2019 model year. The partial plate was consistent with the characters captured at Warnell Road. The registered owner had a prior criminal history that included a weapons charge from 2019, resolved through a plea agreement, and a dismissed charge from 2021 related to a financial transaction dispute. Nothing in the prior history was a bank robbery conviction. But the combination, vehicle match, geographic proximity to all 3 branches, prior criminal record, partial physical description match from the convenience store witness, was enough to open a full investigative file on the registered owner. Agents assigned to physical surveillance of the Ruskin address hit an immediate problem. The registered vehicle was not there. It had not been there for at least 2 days, based on observations from neighbors who spoke with agents during the canvass. The suspect, or the person of interest at this stage not yet formally designated as a suspect, was mobile, not staying at his registered address. He had either anticipated scrutiny or simply maintained a pattern of movement that made static surveillance ineffective. The VCTF coordinator made a decision that would define the next 48 hours of the investigation. Rather than maintaining surveillance on the empty address, agents were repositioned to cover the known geography of the robbery corridor, the stretch of Kansas City between the Waldo neighborhood and Gregory Boulevard, roughly 4 miles across, where 3 robberies had occurred in 6 days. If the crew was going to hit again, the statistical probability based on prior string behavior said it would be within this zone, within the next 72 hours. At the same time, the field office authorized the release of a surveillance still to local media and law enforcement partners. The image, extracted from interior footage at US Bank on Gregory Boulevard, the clearest single frame available after the DVR corruption at UMB Bank, showed the suspect from a partial angle, the lower portion of the face visible below the hat brim. Not a full identification image, enough to generate tips. The tip line opened at 9 a.m. the morning after the public release. By noon, the Kansas City field office had received 63 calls. The vast majority were the standard noise that accompanies any public release: misidentifications, calls about unrelated crimes, good faith reports of people who simply resembled the image. But buried in the 63 was a call that came in at 11:47 a.m. from a woman who said she recognized the clothing in the still image. Not the face, the jacket. She said she had seen that specific jacket, a dark blue windbreaker with a particular stitching pattern on the left sleeve, on a man she knew from a neighborhood several blocks from the Ruskin address. She gave a name. Agents ran the name immediately. The name matched a prior association on record, not with the registered vehicle owner directly, but with a known associate of the vehicle owner who had appeared in the 2019 weapons charge documentation as a co-respondent. The connection was indirect. In investigative terms, it was a thread connecting two people who had previously been in legal trouble together. One owned the vehicle. One had been seen wearing a jacket matching the robbery surveillance footage. The stranger part? They were both currently living, intermittently, at a second address, a rental property in the Belton area, just south of the Kansas City Metro line in Cass County, Missouri. One detail that stuck with me when reviewing how this case developed: the rental property in Belton had been listed on a short-term rental platform under a name that matched neither individual. It was registered to a third party, a woman with no prior criminal history, no connection to the banking sector, no obvious link to either person of interest. Agents would later determine that the rental registration was legitimate. She had rented the property under her own name for a different purpose and had been subletting it informally, without knowledge of who her subtenants were or what they had been doing in Kansas City. She was never charged. But the degree of operational planning implied by using an address with no direct registration link to either suspect was not lost on investigators. This crew had thought about their footprint. The VCTF coordinated with the Cass County Sheriff's Office on the afternoon the Belton address was identified. Under federal authority, a surveillance operation was established around the property. Agents in unmarked vehicles positioned at access points on the two roads leading to the rental. A second team positioned closer to the structure itself. The authorization was handled through the field office's legal counsel in coordination with the United States Attorney's Office for the Western District of Missouri. The federal arrest warrant was in process. The criminal complaint, prepared by VCTF agents and reviewed by an AUSA, cited 3 counts of bank robbery under Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 2113, which governs robbery of financial institutions. Each count corresponded to one of the 3 Kansas City branch robberies. The complaint included a summary of the surveillance evidence, the dye-pack chemical analysis, the vehicle identification, and the tip line information regarding the distinctive jacket. The warrant was signed by a United States magistrate judge at the Western District Courthouse in Kansas City at 4:18 p.m. Agents at the Belton surveillance point confirmed the dark blue Chevrolet Malibu was present at the property at 4:34 p.m. The VCTF entry team moved at 5:11 p.m. before the light dropped. 2 vehicles from the primary access road, 1 from the secondary. The entry team announced federal law enforcement presence and the existence of a valid arrest warrant. There was no exchange of fire, no standoff. The primary suspect was taken into custody at 5:14 p.m. inside the property without significant resistance. The secondary individual, the associate linked through the 2019 co-respondent documentation, was also at the property. He was detained for questioning. The legal threshold for his arrest was separate from the primary warrant, and the AUSA on call was consulted immediately regarding the scope of charges applicable based on what agents were observing inside the property. What agents observed inside was significant. In the rear bedroom of the Belton rental, agents located a bag containing currency consistent with the cash amounts taken in 2 of the 3 robberies. Portions of the currency were stained with red dye compound consistent with the dye pack activated at the Waldo branch. Several bills from the bag matched serial numbers on the bait money list maintained by U.S. Bank for the Gregory Boulevard branch. The dark blue windbreaker matching the tip line description in the surveillance footage was hanging on a hook near the entrance. The forensic evidence package was building rapidly. Bureau forensic technicians, who had traveled to the Belton property with the entry team, began systematic documentation and evidence collection at 5:22 p.m. The process continued through the evening. The primary suspect was transported to KCPD facilities for processing and then to federal custody. His initial appearance before a magistrate was scheduled for the following morning at the courthouse in Kansas City. There is a piece of this investigation we could not fully document for this episode, specifically the complete accounting of how many additional robberies in the surrounding region may be connected to the same crew. If you have seen our previous coverage on Midwest bank robbery patterns, or if you have heard details about related cases in the area, drop a comment below. We read everything, and part 2 may depend on what comes back. The initial appearance before the magistrate took place at 9 a.m. the following morning in the Frank Carlson Federal Building in United States Courthouse in Kansas City. The primary suspect was formally presented with a 3-count criminal complaint. A federal public defender was assigned. The AUSA from the Western District presented the government's case for detention pending trial, citing flight risk in the pattern of repeated offenses. The magistrate ordered pretrial detention. The secondary individual from the Belton property was charged separately under a complaint filed 2 days after the primary arrest, with a single count of being an accessory after the fact, a charge tied to his presence at the property where the robbery proceeds were recovered and his knowledge of the currency's origin, which investigators established through recorded statements made during the initial interview at the scene. What's most surprising about this case is not the speed of the arrest. 9 days from the first robbery to custody is fast by any standard, but the Bureau has moved faster. What's surprising is the degree to which the entire investigation turned on a single civilian observation: the woman who recognized a jacket. Not the cameras, not the database, not the gate analysis software. A person who saw something specific and made a call. In a world where law enforcement increasingly relies on technological infrastructure, this case is a reminder that the most irreplaceable investigative tool is still a human being paying attention. The prosecution of the primary suspect proceeded through the federal court system in the Western District of Missouri. The evidence package assembled by the VCTF was extensive. Surveillance footage from 3 branches, the gate analysis composite, the vehicle identification and registration documentation, the die-pack chemical analysis matching the currency in the Belton property to the Waldo branch incident, the bait money serial number matches linking currency to the Gregory Boulevard branch, and the civilian witness testimony regarding the jacket. The demand notes from all 3 robberies were analyzed by the FBI Laboratories Question Documents Unit in Quantico, Virginia. While no fingerprints had been recovered, the handwriting analysis determined with a high degree of probability that all 3 notes were written by the same individual. The writing instrument was consistent across all 3. A medium-point ballpoint pen with a particular pressure signature. The phrasing of the demands, while not identical, shared structural elements that the document's examiner noted as consistent with a single author. The primary suspect entered a guilty plea to all 3 counts of bank robbery under Title 18, United States Code, Section 2113. The plea was entered in open court before a United States District Judge in the Western District of Missouri. Under the terms of the plea agreement, the government and defense agreed on a sentencing recommendation within the federal guidelines range for the conduct described. Federal sentencing guidelines for bank robbery are calculated based on the base offense level of the crime, adjusted upward for specific factors: the number of victims, whether a dangerous weapon was implied or displayed, the total amount of loss, and the defendant's criminal history category. In this case, the 3-count conviction, combined with the prior criminal history and the pattern of repeated offenses, placed the calculation in a range the guidelines associated with substantial imprisonment. The secondary defendant, charged with accessory after the fact, also entered a guilty plea. His sentencing exposure under the guidelines was significantly lower, given the nature of the charge. But the court made clear at his sentencing hearing that the Bureau of Prisons' term imposed reflected the seriousness of facilitating the concealment of robbery proceeds. The sentencing hearing for the primary defendant took place in the same federal courthouse in Kansas City where the initial appearance had been held. Representatives from all 3 victimized financial institutions provided written statements for the court record. The tellers who had been present during the robberies, 4 individuals across the 3 branches, submitted victim impact statements describing the lasting effect of the incidents: difficulty returning to work, Anxiety responses triggered by specific sounds and situations. Disrupted sleep. Bank robbery is often discussed in the abstract as a financial crime. For the people standing at the counter when it happens, it is something else entirely. The federal district judge, in imposing sentence, cited the pattern of conduct, the deliberate planning evident in the operational method, and the impact on the teller employees as primary factors in the sentencing determination. The primary defendant received a sentence of 115 months in federal prison, 9 years and 7 months, to be served without parole eligibility under the federal system, which abolished parole for offenses committed after November 1, 1987. Following the custodial term, the sentence included 3 years of supervised release. The restitution order accompanying the sentence required repayment of the full amount taken in all 3 robberies to be paid to the victimized financial institutions through the standard federal restitution mechanism administered by the court's finance unit. Here's the part that doesn't fully sit right, even looking back at it now. The die pack at the Waldo branch activated correctly. The currency was stained. The serial numbers were on the bait money list. And yet the crew continued moving, stayed mobile, continued using the rental property for several more days after the Waldo robbery before the net closed at Belton. The forensic evidence existed. The investigative thread was real. The gap between the evidence existing and the arrest happening was still 4 days. In a different scenario, that gap is another robbery, maybe 2. What closed the case was not the die pack. It was a jacket and a phone call. That asymmetry between the technical sophistication of the evidence and the low-tech nature of the final breakthrough is something that should inform how we think about resource investment in bank branch security infrastructure. The Kansas City Field Office's Violent Crimes Task Force released a brief public statement following the sentencing, noting the successful resolution of the case and the collaborative effort between bureau agents and KCPD detectives. The statement did not name individual agents, in keeping with standard bureau practice for cases that do not involve undercover operations, where identity protection is a continuing concern. The Kansas City Police Department's liaison detective, assigned to the VCTF for the duration of the investigation, was recognized internally within KCPD for the role the department's traffic camera network played in developing the vehicle lead. The collaboration between federal and local agencies was cited by the field office as a model for the coordination structure it wanted to replicate in future priority series investigations. The branch on Main Street returned to normal operation within days of the robbery. The teller who had been at the window that Tuesday morning took a brief leave of absence and returned to work several weeks later. The Gregory Boulevard branch in the Waldo location followed a similar pattern. Visible from the outside, normal within days, no permanent closure or structural change driven by the incidents. Kansas City continued to see bank robbery activity consistent with its historical pattern in the months that followed. The FBI's broader surveillance of the phenomenon, regional trends, clustering of incidents in specific commercial corridors, relative frequency compared to other Midwest metropolitan areas, did not show any dramatic reduction tied to the resolution of this particular string. One crew removed from the street does not reshape a structural pattern. The VCTF was aware of this. The case was a win. It was also, in the arithmetic of the ongoing workload, one file closed among many still open. The Bureau's institutional response to Kansas City's bank robbery volume has included periodic evaluations of branch-level security infrastructure in cooperation with the financial sector. The FBI's Financial Institution Crimes Unit maintains ongoing relationships with major bank chains operating in high-incident metropolitan areas, providing guidance on die pack placement, camera coverage zones, and teller training protocols. That guidance does not always translate into implementation. Banks balance security investment against operational cost and customer experience. The gap between what the Bureau recommends and what gets installed is a recurring tension in the public-private relationship around financial institution security. What this case demonstrated is that the most effective deterrent remains the one that has always mattered most: the certainty of being identified and caught. The technology helps, the task force structure helps, the interagency coordination helps, but the fundamental calculation for a bank robbery crew is risk versus reward. And when that tips towards certainty of capture, the behavior changes. A 9-day resolution on a 3-robbery string sends a message the FBI's Kansas City field office wanted sent clearly. Whether that message is received by the next person who considers sliding a note across a teller window is, of course, a different question. The Bureau's answer is the same one it has always given. The Violent Crimes Task Force will be at work tomorrow morning, at the same time the branch is open, with the same case management system, the same traffic camera network, the same forensic chemistry capability, and the same tip line. Waiting. 9 days, 3 robberies. 1 crew off the street, with a federal sentence measured in years rather than months. The tellers who were in those branches on those mornings were not abstract entries in a case file. They were people at work, doing their jobs, placed in a frightening situation by someone who had decided that their labor, their security, and their peace of mind were acceptable costs of a robbery plan. The federal prosecution treated the case accordingly. Every tool in the investigative sequence was used. Not every tool delivered. The one that finally closed the distance was a human being who recognized a jacket. That is the FBI's most durable instrument. And it is also, every single time, the hardest one to replicate. If this kind of deep investigative reconstruction is what you come here for, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. We go through cases like this one regularly, and the next episode goes somewhere you will not expect. Leave a comment with what you want to see covered next, and we will read everyone.